Hello scholars, welcome, Mr. Hinkle here. Let's talk about water that's in the ground. We call it groundwater. Amazing, I know. So what we're doing today is introducing the concept of groundwater, its relevance and its importance, its distribution in society. In another lecture, we'll get into the geological processes of groundwater, but let's set the stage here. So groundwater is water that's found in the cracks, in spaces, in the soil, in sand, and in rock. It is stored underneath the surface of the earth in geological formations, and it is a very important source of of fresh water, because there is a lot of it, and it's everywhere, in greater distributions in some areas than others, but we have the ability to pump groundwater up to the surface and use it for industrial, agricultural, and municipal uses. Groundwater. Okay, so if we think about the distribution of water, Earth is the blue planet. 71% of the surface of the Earth is covered by oceans. 29% of the surface Earth is covered by land. With all that ocean, most of Earth's water is salt water, about 97.5. The rest, 2.5%, is fresh water. Of that fresh water, about 2/3 of it is locked up in glaciers and ice caps, specifically Greenland and Antarctica, and then about the other 1/3 is groundwater. Now, a much smaller portion, about 1% of that fresh water, is going to be in rivers and lakes and streams. Very small, although very important, as we've learned from surface water lectures. 30% of available fresh water for human use is in groundwater. That's the most abundant resource, which is why groundwater is so important. Global distribution. We got blues. Light blue less than a meter. Middle blue 1 to 50. This dark kind of purple is greater than 50 meters. So what do we see here? The whole world has groundwater. Wherever there are continental rocks, those rocks contain water of varying quantities. Not so much Antarctica is left off, it's frozen. We get up into regions that are frozen. Northern Canada, Alaska, Greenland, Siberia. The water is not available because it's not water, it's frozen. So those are not included in our global distribution of groundwater. Groundwater moves through the subsurface underneath the influence of gravity via pressure gradients, and then also is contained and housed and blocked and stored using or within geological structures called aquifers. That's the next lecture. It moves relatively slowly, and the deeper the groundwater is, the slower it goes. The closer the groundwater is to the surface, the faster it moves. And the groundwater reflects the topography of the land surface. So it's something like this. Mountains and valleys. There's a river. Mountains. Our groundwater reflects the topography. The geology can impede or facilitate the movement of groundwater. So, groundwater everywhere on the earth, stored underneath the surface, but the movement and the distribution varies based on the subsurface geology. Water is important for so much, for watering our farms. We use it to drink. You may live in a home that has a well. Your well is a hole dug into the ground that actually pumps up groundwater. And we've been using groundwater for thousands of years to drink, for agriculture. Groundwater is important for natural ecosystems, and then we also use it for industry and for development. Here in the Central Valley, groundwater is a big issue, and water rights in general is a big topic. Water governance, water law. Groundwater management is also a big deal. of which we're trying to figure out how do we protect these natural resources without overuse, without over-extraction. The Central Valley has a lot of groundwater, and it's being pumped by individuals on their land and large organizations, big farms that are owning big areas of land. So managing this is a very hot topic. It's very political, a little outside of the scope of our discussion, but this is going to be a key issue, especially in the Central Valley moving forward. We need your help. Learn about groundwater, become a scientist, get involved in environmental policy, and let's protect our earth so that we don't use up what we've got. Thank you so much in advance. I really appreciate that. Because this is what can happen. Here's an individual. The groundwater has been pumped. In fact, in this one spot, the land surface elevation has dropped by about 40 feet in 1925. This person would have been standing up here. 30 years later, here. 30 years later, here. And that's because the groundwater was actually bolstering up the sediment. So you pump the water out, and the sediment settled and consolidated and lowered the surface of the earth. So regional pumping induced groundwater decline is known as groundwater mining, leads to groundwater overdraft, and it causes land subsidence. So there are issues with over pumping of groundwater. Groundwater can also get contaminated through all of the various practices that we have. Mines, oil, industry, agriculture. When our groundwater gets polluted, because groundwater flows eventually into various reservoirs that we use on the surface or into our wells, then that contamination needs to be cleaned up, because access to clean and safe drinking water, the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, is a human right. And for many of us, we have wells, and those wells deserve to not be contaminated. But groundwater contamination happens. This is the whole environmental consulting industry. We've created problems and issues. We need to fix and correct them. Remediation, the act of cleaning up the contamination from polluted groundwater sources. Okay, groundwater, really important, ubiquitous. In order to live sustainably and not overuse these natural resources, we need to understand how they function. That's going to be the purpose of our next lecture, but also recognize them in the context of our present-day society and have the correct rules and regulations enabled to govern water policy, and in specific groundwater policy, so that we can all utilize this resource for the betterment of us all. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again.